There's a story attached to each one of these images, and it's likely that story would have stayed inside a very small community had I not overcome my uneasiness at approaching strangers. Getting past my fears enabled me to establish a connection with my neighbors, who just happen to live in different parts of the world than I do. Overcoming my doubts allowed me to listen to them deeply, and they, in turn, did the same for me. This process of discovery showed me, once again, that we are more alike than different. They graciously agreed to spend some time in front of my camera lens. As much as I like the photos, it's the personal stories that hold the greatest interest for me. I hope your experience will be similar. I want you to take a moment and get an image of the worst place that you could live. Now, imagine moving there with the hope of improving your life. Well, that's exactly what one family did. After living hand-to-mouth in rural Colombia for several years, the Recalias relocated to one of the poorest areas in Cartagena, believing things would be better for them. They entered the city as invisible citizens in their country. No birth certificate, no driver's license, or any other identification. No income, no jobs, and no prospects. Most homes here do not have electricity or running water. Unemployment is rampant, and people are tightly packed. Chickens and pigs run loose picking through garbage for bits of food. Seasonal rains create cascades of water, trash, and waste that get deposited in the lowest areas of the slum, creating a giant petri dish that the Center for Disease Control would be proud to have cultivated. To believe their lives would get better in that slum required a level of hope that cannot be measured on my optimism meter. Unbeknownst to the Recalias, their unfounded optimism was about to yield some results. A foundation working with the city and local businesses had established an office and a community center in the slum. Residents were provided with information on how to turn their backyards into gardens and taught how to sell their products to local grocers and restaurants. The underpinning of this foundation's work was to demonstrate that everyone has value and can be a contributor. They offered resources, not handouts. The foundation and its resources were a godsend for the Recalias. They, in turn, were great ambassadors for the program. Leaders at the foundation expressed their appreciation by presenting the Recalias with a vacant house near the edge of the community. It was a shelter and little else. When the couple told the foundation leaders that one thing they most wanted was to solemnize their marriage, their hopes were realized. In lieu of wedding presents, the foundation workers and residents cleaned, repaired, and repainted the Recalias' home and added a new fence for good measure. In short order, Mrs. Recalia set about converting her back to a series of raised beds for herbs and vegetables. With earnings from the sale of her produce, she constructed a pen and bought 3 pigs. While most other livestock owners let their pigs run wild to find food where they could, Mrs. Recalia walked to the neighborhood school each day and returned with 2 buckets of scraps for good measure. On the day I visited, Mrs. Recalia was tending her garden. The plants appeared to be very healthy and weed-free. The whole area was well organized, and even the pigsty was clean, which didn't seem to bother its occupants. After showing my translator and me around the garden, Mrs. Recalia invited us into her home. I expected to see a place that was only essential furnishings, and that's what I found. What I didn't expect was how clean everything was. Even with the tropical climate and a pig pen close by, the home smelled fresh. When I told her how impressed I was with all she and her husband had done with their property and how nice everything looked, Mrs. Recalia paused and said, "You can't always control your financial situation, but cleanliness is a choice." For me, that was a profound observation from someone who has an advanced degree from life's school of hard knocks. As I stepped through her front gate and looked back, the Raquelia home, with its freshly painted fence, appeared as a tidy island in a sea of weeds, trash, and rundown shacks. It was a place created by hope when all evidence pointed to hopelessness, and a home made possible by a community who loved their neighbor. It was a great reminder that loving my neighbor requires me to act. If I ever hope to walk on water, I have to get out of the boat.